continues tonight inside the bin Laden organization, a defector's story, an ABC News exclusive. Are the Taliban feeling the pressure? How to read the signs? The government is holding more than 300 people now. Is the government going too far in the name of safety? Our special series assessing the risks. Tonight it is anthrax. Are some people overreacting? And so many funerals with a shortage of mourners. Now the firefighters ask the public for help.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening, everyone. The Justice Department showed us pictures today of all the men who hijacked the planes and attacked the United States 16 days ago. And the president told the nation today that people should fly again. It is, he said, good for the country. We'll get to those developments in just a minute. But we're going to begin tonight with an inside story from Osama bin Laden's organization. Some time ago, our investigative unit managed to get in touch with a man who had defected from bin Laden. And ABC's John Miller is with us tonight. John, you have talked to him twice, before these attacks and afterwards. Who is he and what does he say?
Well, Peter, this man who we call Max trained for 6 months to learn how to plan effective terrorist attacks and avoid detection. He left bin Laden's organization after 2 years when he became disillusioned with plots that targeted innocent civilians. Now he's cooperating with the U.S. government. We first spoke with this man several weeks ago in a country far enough away from Afghanistan that he would feel safe. But after the attacks on New York and Washington and the release of pictures of the 19 hijackers, we wanted to ask him, did he recognize any of them from bin Laden's camps in Afghanistan?
Yeah, he was in Afghanistan in training camps. Yeah, he was at the same camp. He was my classmate. You know, I could recognize from his face. He's from Saudi Arabia.
He picked out a photo of Majed Moked, and if Max is right, he may have provided an important link between bin Laden and the hijackers. You know, Americans were shocked that 19 men would commit suicide, even in a plot like this. Were you shocked?
Yeah, I'm shocked. But there are not only 19 people. There are 1,000 people. They want to sacrifice themselves on bin Laden. All of them want to do this kind of actions, I mean, terrorism actions.
Max gave us some insight into Osama bin Laden and the effect he has on his followers. He said bin Laden warned them that the United States and Israel wanted to destroy Islam and that they must be destroyed first. He said his 18 fellow students were sent back to cities in the Middle East, Europe, and Canada, where they were told to wait for instructions. And he has no doubt they will follow them.
If bin Laden asked him to put a bomb on your body and explode it with yourself, so they won't say no. They will do that.
Max says bin Laden expects to die a martyr. President Bush has said bin Laden is wanted dead or alive. Do you think if the U.S. goes into Afghanistan, either with the Army or Special Forces, that they would be able to find bin Laden?
No, it's impossible to find bin Laden. Bin Laden has many places in Afghanistan. They cannot find him.
And Max tells us bin Laden is still guarded by a cadre of bodyguards, including 3 of his sons, all of whom are heavily armed.
Many thanks, John. John Miller. There'll be more about this, by the way, later tonight on Primetime Thursday. Now the pictures. Today, the FBI released the pictures of all the men that they say hijacked the planes and attacked the U.S. The FBI has done so for a reason. And in Washington tonight is ABC's Pierre Thomas. Pierre?
Peter, the public has only seen glimpses of a few of the hijackers. Today, all the faces of the terrorists were on display.
At FBI headquarters, 19 hijackers officially identified for the first time through driver's licenses and passports. American Airlines Flight 11, which crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. 5 hijackers, 4 of them thought to be pilots, including suspected ringleader Mohammed Atta of Egypt. United Airlines Flight 175, which flew into the South Tower of the Trade Center. 5 hijackers, all recently living in Florida, at least 1 pilot on board. American Airlines Flight 77, which smashed into the Pentagon. 5 hijackers. Hani Hanjour, a Saudi national thought to be the pilot and believed to be another organizer. United Airlines Flight 93, which dove into the Pennsylvania countryside. 4 hijackers, all recently residing in Florida, and at least 1 pilot. Of the 19 hijackers, at least 8 were Saudi nationals, 7 were pilots, at least 12 recently based in Florida. The rest recently living in California, Arizona, Massachusetts, and New Jersey.
It is our hope that the release of these photos will prompt others who may have seen the hijackers or been in contact with them to contact the FBI with any information they may have.
Thus far, the FBI has received 200,000 leads. And with the release of today's photographs, they're looking for even more. Peter?
Thank you, Pierre. Pierre Thomas in Washington. The president flew to Chicago today. It was partly a trip to boost the airline's morale. They are, as you know, hurting financially, and they also lost flight crews to the terrorists. The president also wanted, in a very big way, to get the nation flying again.
One of the great goals of this nation's war is to restore public confidence in the airline industry, is to tell the traveling public, get on board.
The president promised $500 million to redesign and fortify cockpits. He said there'd be a dramatic increase in the number of armed air marshals on commercial flights, and the federal government would manage passenger and baggage security. Mr. Bush also said the federal government would pay for the states to bring in the National Guard to patrol in a very visible way at the nation's airports. It will, of course, all take time, but there is clearly support for much greater security. Here's ABC's Dean Reynolds.
Please have all boarding passes out.
There were long lines at a number of airports today, but no one seemed to mind that the bag checks, once routine, were now meticulous, as inspectors appeared more focused on any suspect object.
Whatever they need to do to get us through safely.
Most applauded the president's new air safety plan.
I don't know how much more you can do and still make it operational.
Fortifying cockpit doors now appears to be a must, along with the presence of armed air marshals on the planes.
You certainly want them on your international flights, you want them in your major sectors, and you want them adequately trained.
But the president stopped short of having federal government workers screen passengers, and many say that's a mistake. Keeping security in private hands, they say, however big the government oversight is, will still leave questions about standards and training, because the determining factor to any private contractor will be the cost. And while screening passengers is an obvious necessity, what about the often spotty checks made on ground crews, baggage handlers, or those who provide airplane meals? They have relatively free access, and some in Congress want tighter controls.
We focus on passengers and what they bring on board, but we should also focus on every single person who could enter that airplane at any time.
And while the White House is against it, some pilots want to be armed with guns.
Do we want the pilots up there to be helpless? Absolutely not. We want them to have the ability to make sure that no one will ever get control of an airliner again, and that means we've got to arm them.
The president's plan will take up to 6 months to implement, so the National Guard will be patrolling airports temporarily. That's a highly visible step designed as much to restore travelers' confidence as it is to provide security. Dean Reynolds, ABC News, Chicago.
Just one other item about the airline. Since our report last night on some airline employees who've been laid off not getting any severance package from the airlines, both American and Northwest have changed course and said they will now provide some financial help. American said that it is only able to do so because of the aid it is getting from the government. And now we're going to go to the Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense has also been dealing today with this question of commercial air travel and security. ABC's John McCarthy is at the Pentagon tonight. John, the military has been having to deal today with that horrible question of whether you shoot down a commercial airliner at a moment of crisis. What are the specific guidelines?
First of all, Peter, one thing that has changed is the FAA is immediately providing military with any indications that a commercial airliner is deviating in any way from its flight path. That gives the military more time. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld says that in almost any instance, he and the president will be involved in a decision, but he admits if the decision is going to have to be made in just seconds, that he has designated 2 senior military officers to make the decision. In no case would a pilot actually make the decision to fire.
John, there was some heavy-duty criticism in the papers today that the administration didn't have a plan for Afghanistan or bin Laden. Other people say the administration has taken a very careful approach to a complicated program or a complicated problem. Is there pressure being felt there?
There is some pressure, Peter, but as the administration has discovered, the U.S. has very few ties in that region. It has weak economic ties. It has bad intelligence and not too many good friends. So what they've decided to do is to take a little time, build up some of those friendships, and work on the intelligence, so when and if they decide to strike, they will have a much better and coherent strategy to do so.
Many thanks. John McWethy at the Pentagon. Now let's go to the region. We learned today that a delegation of senior officials in Pakistan will go to Afghanistan tomorrow in what may be a last-ditch effort to convince the Taliban regime to change its mind to hand over Osama bin Laden and abandon its support of terrorism. As ABC's Bob Woodruff reports from the region tonight, there are some signs that the Taliban may be feeling the pressure.
The Taliban's military forces are facing threats from outside and from opposition forces inside the country. And Afghan refugees who have fled the country say the Taliban is moving its fighters away from less populated areas to Afghanistan's major cities. Some observers believe the Taliban is shifting its resources to be sure it can protect the areas that matter most.
They think that probably if they're going to have to create a front, a defensive front, it's going to be to the north of Kabul or to the south of Kandahar.
In the capital, Kabul, today, there were long lines for food and a warning from the Taliban leader to anyone found to be collaborating with the U.S. Afghans who are brought in by the Americans, he said, will be treated like those who were brought in by the communists, a reference to the Soviets who died in Afghanistan by the thousands.
He wanted to reassure his own supporters that the Taliban are still in power and they will fight until the end.
In unusually blunt language today, a senior UN official in Pakistan said the Taliban is losing the support of its own people and called for a change.
The vast majority of Afghans have been helpless hostages in their own country for far too long.
Today, Taliban leaders indirectly admitted they now know where Osama bin Laden is. After days of saying they had no idea where he had gone, they said today they had finally succeeded in delivering him the message that he leave the country. Bob Woodruff, ABC News, Islamabad.
Later in the broadcast this evening, more than the usual suspects. After the terror, there's been an unprecedented roundup. And when there are too many funerals, trying to honor them all.
$29, $30.
Now at Red Lobster, you can get 30 mouth-watering shrimp for just $9.99. Red Lobster, go overboard.
The pain was awful. I was missing my own party. The pain got so bad I wanted to lie down, but it just got worse. Then I rediscovered a real lifesaver, Extra Strength Bayer Aspirin. Nothing's proven stronger than Extra Strength Bayer on tough pain, not even a leading prescription. It's real relief I can depend on. And my doctor said only aspirin can help save your life by protecting your heart. Beautiful.
Bayer. Take it for pain, take it for life.
I'd like a latte, please.
Do you have an appointment? Grab a ticket. We'll be with you in just a minute. Yeah.
Coffee houses are popular, very popular. Well, what if you just want coffee house style coffee in an instant? Folgers Cafe Latte. Rich, creamy, delicious coffee house coffee without the coffee house. So it's not the coffee you drink to take a break from your day. It's the coffee you drink to break into it. Folgers Cafe Latte.
Magazine? Book? Anybody?
The more you live, the more a bladder control issue shouldn't hold you back. New Serenity Slender gives you 3 layers of protection. The core of super absorbers keeps you drier. New Serenity Slender. More protection, less bad. Now that's more you.
Mom, how many Tums did you take right in front of the wedding planner?
You snuck one too.
It was a Pepcid Complete.
Is that the same as Pepcid AC?
No, there's nothing else like Pepcid Complete. It works fast like Tums, but it lasts for hours like Pepcid AC. So your heartburn goes away and then stays away.
Chewable? Calcium? I gotta try this.
Decisions?
Tony, fabulous.
Pepcid Complete. Just one and heartburn's done.
Have you tried the anchovy cookies?
Oh, yeah.
And the jalapeno dip?
As of today, more than 300 people have been detained or arrested in the United States since the attacks on September 11th as part of the investigation. But not one of them has been charged yet with a crime related to the terrorism. And today, some civil libertarians are beginning to call the roundup a witch hunt. Here's ABC's Dan Harris.
Dr. Al-Badr al-Hamzi was released Tuesday after being held for nearly 2 weeks by federal officials as what's called a material witness.
I'm glad it's over.
He wasn't charged with a crime. Investigators locked him up because they thought he might have information related to the case. The government can hold material witnesses against their will as long as a judge decides the witness is a flight risk. In San Diego, family members and supporters of 3 Arab men who have also been arrested as material witnesses compare this tactic to the internment of the Japanese during World War II.
And I have to ask myself, are the principles on which this country is founded being adhered to in this particular scenario? And I submit to you that they're not.
In this massive investigation, law enforcement officials are making unprecedented use of their powers to arrest and detain people. They're holding hundreds of people, either as material witnesses or on minor immigration violations or unrelated criminal charges. Mohammed Abdi, a security guard, is being held on check forging charges after police found his name on a map inside a car belonging to one of the suspected hijackers.
It's got to be the case that many of these people are wholly innocent, that their only connection is that they may have known somebody.
While civil libertarians call the government's tactics excessive, others say extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures.
You want to make sure that you do everything possible to preserve the national security of the United States.
As of today, at least, law enforcement officials make no apologies for their actions. Dan Harris, ABC News, New York.
Now, there is some other news today. In the national briefing tonight, another curfew in Cincinnati. It was imposed last night by the mayor. There were demonstrations yesterday after a white police officer who killed an unarmed black man was acquitted. Last night, more than a dozen people were arrested. And the Labor Department said today the number of Americans filing first-time applications for unemployment benefits rose to a 9-year high last week. There were 58,000 more new claims last week than the week before. Some of this may be connected to the attacks on the U.S. There were 11,000 new claims in the New York area. When we come back, risk assessment, the anthrax scare, and the run on a single antibiotic.
Maalox Quick Dissolve challenges regular Tums. Who dissolves quicker? Maalox. Neutralizes more acid? Maalox. Has more calcium? Maalox. 3 ways the right choice is Maalox Quick Dissolve. Agree or it's free.
You are no longer soldiers. Each one of you is nothing more than the shadow of a soldier.
They are prisoners. They've been murders. With one last chance.
The eagle he wears on his shoulder may make him an officer, but it doesn't give him the authority to take away who we are.
To become heroes again.
We are soldiers.
Robert Redford, James Gandolfini, Mark Ruffalo, and Delroy Lindo. The Last Castle. Rated R. Starts Friday, October 19th.
Life is like a sport. The impact of each step impacts more than just your feet. But new Stride Guard insoles absorb 50% more heel impact than these Dr. Scholl's. Take more impact in stride. New Stride Guard insoles.
Count on Meineke for preventive maintenance and see what a change you can make in your car. That includes a regular oil change. Get one right now, and Meineke will throw in free wiper blades.
At Meineke, you won't pay a lot, but you'll get a lot.
Always presents the facts of protection. We change position an average of 32 times a night. That's a lot of moving, which is why we need Always Overnight with more side protection. Always wings are double the length of other wings to help protect where others don't, even when we move. Double the wing sure beats half a wing. Always expect more protection.
Too many high-interest monthly payments? Why not pay them off with a second mortgage with a no closing cost option from Ditech.com? Apply online now or call us at 1-800-71-FIXED. And there is no equity required. Ditech Second Mortgage with a no closing cost option can help you to consolidate your high interest debts into one low monthly payment. It's smart money from Ditech.com. Apply online now or call us at 1-800-71-FIXED.
Now, the same Caltrate that helps fight bone loss may help your colon too. In a recent study, Caltrate helped reduce the risk of recurrence of colon polyps, a risk factor for colon cancer. The same Caltrate you take for your bones, now for colon health too.
Tonight, chilling details from inside Bin Laden's secret training camps. For months, he trained to be a Bin Laden operative. Tonight, what he tells Primetime will shock you. Tomorrow, how many hands touch your plane before you get on? Caterers, mechanics, cleaners, who's got a pass? Good Morning America's special report tomorrow.
It is hard in the wake of these attacks to measure the anxiety in the United States. For some, it is a fear of flying, which the president tried to alleviate today. For many, it is the possibility that in this war with the terrorists, they will strike again. As we go along, we're trying to take a closer look at what it is that frightens people without adding to the fear. We have looked at whether the water supply is safe and the possible threat from trucks carrying hazardous material. Now we note that people are seeking protection against anthrax. And so here's ABC's John McKenzie.
If you want a sense of just how jittery some Americans are today, check out some of the nation's pharmacies. There's now a run on an antibiotic to treat anthrax.
If we normally dispense 100 a day, probably doing 1,000 a day now.
I have never seen anything like this before.
Cipro, a drug used for years to treat a variety of infections, including bronchitis and pneumonia, was approved last year as the first drug to treat inhaled anthrax, a deadly disease. Within days of the attack on the World Trade Center, Greta Kubikas asked her doctor for a prescription.
For us New Yorkers, I think it's just too close not to think about it. And just having a medication like this it's reassuring.
But the anthrax treatment requires 2 pills a day for 60 days. The cost can be about $700 per person. Many doctors and public health officials tonight say the hoarding of drugs is another example of the fear gripping some Americans. They say that stockpiling antibiotics, like buying up gas masks, makes little sense. Experts in bioterrorism say an anthrax attack is unlikely, that anthrax is difficult to make, difficult to store, and difficult to disperse. And even if an attack were attempted, they say a stash of antibiotics may not be the answer.
You're not going to have any real benefit. The need to determine what the agent is that's actually causing the outbreak and knowing what it's resistant to, you may be stockpiling the wrong antibiotic.
Federal health officials say Cipro is one of many medications in a national stockpile of drugs available throughout the country, if it's ever needed. John McKenzie, ABC News, New York.
When we come back this evening, not enough people for the funerals.
Your eyes need nutrition as well as the rest of your body, so Centrum and Centrum Silver added lutein to help maintain your precious sight. Now your eyes, your toes, and everything in between are covered by Centrum and Centrum Silver. More complete from Ada Zinc.
Folgers Decaf. Really good coffee.
I like to come here early in the morning, before the rest of the world puts their 2 cents in.
When you have pain and sleeplessness, but worry about taking something, reach for Tylenol PM. It's non-habit forming, stops your pain and helps you sleep, so you can wake up refreshed.
If I don't have a good morning, I don't hold out much hope for the rest of the day.
Take comfort. It's Tylenol PM.
The Heartburn Hotel. If you suffer persistent heartburn 2 days a week or more, despite diet change and treatment, it may be acid reflux disease. Prescription Prevacid can mean 24-hour relief from acid reflux disease. Prevacid turns off tiny pumps that produce acid. It has a low occurrence of side effects, such as diarrhea, abdominal pain, and nausea. Ask your doctor if Prevacid is right for you.
So leave your heartburn behind,
Coming up next on K2 News, noxious gas hospitalizes 16 students and 1 teacher at a Washington school. Where could the sickening fumes have come from? President Bush unveils his plan to make America's planes safer against terrorists. And Portland police review their tactics to find out how prepared they are against terrorist attacks. It's all next.
Before our last report, just a brief review of where we began tonight with testimony from a member of Osama bin Laden's network. He recognized one of the dead hijackers from a bin Laden training camp. The FBI's released photographs of all 19 men who hijacked the planes on September the 11th. And finally, something that caught us by surprise today. The New York City Fire Department is asking the public for help. They do not have enough men to go to their funerals.
Detail, hands up.
A firefighter's funeral has its own pageantry. The casket is carried on a fire truck. Thousands of firefighters turn out, often from thousands of miles away. It is tradition. But now, in New York, with another funeral every day, there are not enough firemen available to do it right.
There have been so many firefighters lost that it's hard to cover those funerals.
So many funerals. And still the grim work goes on at Ground Zero. Today, the firefighters stopped only briefly when another body was found in the wreckage. That is why the department is asking the public to show up at a funeral.
Go into that church if you can and say goodbye and give the family that support of knowing that there are thousands of people there supporting that firefighter.
They would be there themselves if they could. That's our report on World News tonight. Later this evening, don't forget Prime Time Thursday. I'm Peter Jennings. I hope we'll see you again tomorrow. Good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
This fall, Friday has a whole new look.
Dude, that's your stepmom.
When Once and Again moves to its new night.
I don't hear anything, do you?
Once and Again moves to Fridays.